Good afternoon, and welcome everyone to this amazing Saturday, first Saturday of February 2021. Today we'll have Kirsten with us, starting this amazing month and talking about a very interesting topic that we'd like to talk about it and connect with one another. One second. Before we go ahead and pass the word to Kirsten, I would like to read a passage of the book Happy Life, as well as um, pray with one another to make sure that we connect with the higher minds, our mentors, the mentors of the SSB, so we can learn as much as we can from this amazing moment that we put together here for our Saturday. Joanna de Angelis on the book Happy Life that was received through the medium Divaldo Franco says, constantly search for your real identity. That is, discover the good in you. You will note that you are neither better nor worse than others. What counts is what you do. With this awareness, you will realize that you have no right to privileges, nor are you abandoned by the divinity. With everything that happens to you becomes a profitable lesson for your spiritual growth, since that is what you are on earth for. Gather all your accomplishments and turn them into lessons of wisdom, which will enrich you with blessings. It is an amazing message for us to start. So let us, in a moment of prayer, connect with the higher minds, connect with our mentors. And as we are praying, let us try to rescue what's inside of us that is of goodness, of kindness, giving thanks to our dear Father, Mother, God for this amazing moment, for all our efforts to be a better individual, a better spirit here on planet Earth. We ask you, dear Lord, that you guide our minds, our hearts tonight, and that we can learn as much as possible so we can put into practice, not only to alleviate the burdens of our own lives, but the lives of others. Guide us, lead us to ensure that we are living a more fulfilling life, utilizing the resources that we have to the best of our abilities. And why not, as we are praying for one another who is following us here now or in the future, to pray for all of those who may not be in a position to watch a moment like this, to connect with the higher minds, those who are in despair, going through difficult moments. Let us send our good vibrations to our brothers and sisters, perhaps a family member or a friend, someone who may be going through a tough moment. Those family members and friends, anybody whom we connect, who have lost someone dearly to them due to this moment of pandemic. May this moment that we pray, that we settle our minds and our hearts, be a moment for them to connect with their mentors as we send our good vibrations to them. And as we feel energized and connected with one another, we ask you that you guide the mind and heart of our dear friend Kirsten, who will lead us tonight into this amazing topic. May your guidance, protection, and permission be with us this afternoon into this evening. So, Kirsten, as we were saying, kicking off this amazing month of February, it's yes, January is gone. So, if we didn't start our what we promised in the end of 2020, you were late. But there's still time. It's still February, right? And what we will talk about tonight is actually one of the things that we really strive to get better at it, right, Kirsten? It's that question. Does Spiritism really talks about money? Does Spiritism really cares about money? Is it important to know about money? Since we are spiritualizing ourselves to become more freer from mundane things. Well, It does. Spiritism does address it, and I am really happy that you are addressing this, Kirsten, with us, talking about money, scarcity, and wealth. So, with no further ado, I'll pass the word to you. Lead us into this amazing topic, please.
Thank you, Leo. Yes, let me just move around my PowerPoint here one second. And there we go. Perfect. Well, good evening, everyone. Yeah, so definitely when we talk about money, and actually let me just, again, adjust myself here because a little technical stuff. Okay. I think this is good. Okay. I think we're good to go, folks. Money. Who doesn't love to talk about money? Who doesn't like to hear about money? Who doesn't like to think about inheriting a whole ton? You know, we think of money oftentimes something really negative at times, or something really desirable, or just something unattainable. And for sure, when we talk about money, when we think about money, it's not equated with spirituality. And excuse me for one second. It's definitely not equated with spirituality, but what in fact it really ought to, because money is nothing more than a vehicle. It is nothing more than a neutral thing in which we can utilize for the good or for the not so good. So let's just kind of get an overview of a little bit of the history behind it. And we'll talk about some neuroscience of money, and we'll talk about some research also. And then we're going to dive into what Spiritism has to say and how it plays a role in our spiritual journey and how it should be viewed and respected. So let's go ahead and look at and define money as for what it is, and it just basically means something of value. So throughout history, money has its place. You know, many hundreds of thousands of years ago, as early as 9,000 BC, there was a barter system, which basically was, I'd give you my cow for your turkey, or I would give you 3 of my chickens for your something else. So we would exchange, often would be livestock or something to that effect. Like if I had something you wanted and you had something I wanted, we kind of would just exchange that. And moving on, believe it or not, these little, they're called cowrie shells, also were a source of money in 1200 BC. Wouldn't we love it that we're our source of money now, right? And around 700 BC, we have the minted coins. Then we came up around 1870s, 1900s, the gold standard. That ended for a good long while. Then we have the Bretton Woods system, and then we have the regular cash money, and now we're looking more so at electronic money or cryptocurrency, as some are looking at as well. So this is just the evolution of money. We can't say for sure and for certain where it's going. We can kind of have an idea where it might go, but money, this idea of money has always existed. This exchange of values for one thing or another has always existed within this human experience, right? But one of the things that's really important for us to think about as we create this new understanding of money is understanding what is scarcity and wealth. And let me read this quote for you from the book Money, which I have right here, and I'll be showing you later on the screen another picture of it. In this book, Emmanuel says, in essence, scarcity and wealth are not elements that we have, but they are feeling that we have. I'm going to read that again. In essence, scarcity and wealth, scarcity meaning not having, and wealth meaning being in abundance, they're not elements that we have. They're not things, but they are feeling. So to feel wealthy has nothing to do with actual possessions, and to feel scarcity, the opposite, has nothing to do with having lack thereof, but rather it's a feeling that we feel. Why is that? So we have the body, we have the mind, body experiences emotions, and of course the mind experiences the feelings. So of course we are mind, body, and spirit respectively, which we're not going to go obviously very deep into because most of us have a good understanding of what that is, but one is equally married to the other. So whatever I'm feeling, it manifests physically in my body as an emotion. So I'm going to have this experience, right? Good or bad, positive and negative, depending upon what those things are. But it's important to understand how the mechanism of all this kind of works, how it all kind of trickles down into us as human beings, as spiritual beings. That it's one thing to say, well, this person is rich, but rich or wealth is really not something we can use that to categorize, but really wealth is something that we feel. And anyone that feels this richness in their life can understand this more in depth, can say, I may only have just the bare necessities, but I feel extremely wealthy. I have love, I have peace of mind, and I just enjoy the simplicities of life. Likewise, there are a great number of people that it appears as though they have a lot of physical wealth that feel like something is missing. They feel scarcity when the rest of the world looks at them as wealthy. And sometimes there are wealthy people that feel like they're missing things. So, it seems paradoxical, but it's just to say that wealth is not in the physical things that we have. It truly is an emotion, it is a feeling, and is ultimately also a perspective that we hold. But let's talk a little bit about the research, because there's a lot of neuroscience, believe it or not, behind money. Now, one might think, well, of course, we're going to study in science, we like to study an array of things. Well, one would be correct in thinking that we could say or surmise that one of the reasons why money has been studied over the decades, and largely, not largely, but largely because of certain businesses wanting to know how it works to manipulate us. So let's just talk about the pure science of it. So, are we using money, or is money using us? Are you using money, or is it using you? It's something to think about. So let's talk about this. So there's something called the psychophysics and the credit card companies, okay? There's something called psychophysics. We're only going to mention a couple of main ones. You can actually, if you go on to Google and type in ResearchGate and the realities of spending, the entire report, it's a free research, it's published, you can read it in depth. But we just grabbed a few key points just to see how the system, how our brain works, and how businesses and marketing and everything is created to manipulate this knowledge for their gain and our loss. Let me explain. So first is how the brain subjectively perceives external stimuli. So let's break that down. So imagine credit cards. Okay, so the idea of a credit card is that you have, let's say you have a $650 or $1,000 credit limit. Okay, so normally what people usually do is that they'll go and use their credit card and they'll spend like $20 or $30 or 10 or 15 or 5 or whatnot, and it doesn't seem like it's a lot because that's how the brain perceives it as external stimuli. But if you were to go and charge a large amount, you would have this feeling of, wow, that's a lot, versus making smaller payments. So it doesn't really feel like I'm spending a lot of money. But a lot of people who are in debt, when you actually break down credit cards, you see it's not necessarily always large lump sums. It tends to be very small things over a period of time. And this works because credit card companies know this, so they extend the time when we can pay back our debts to them. But let me go on, and we're going to add to this so everything kind of comes together and makes sense. So another aspect, it's called mental accounting. This also takes an effect into how we spend our money. These are the different things as entitled of this particular publication, The Realities of Spending. So there's something called mental accounting. And why is mental accounting important? Why is it important for us to be self-aware? Well, the huge reason why. So science has shown, and we actually quote it here, and we're going to break it down. Psychological evaluation, this is what mental accounting is the psychological evaluation of the transaction can be broken down into perceived benefits of consumption and perceived cost of paying. Specifically within each transaction account, thinking about the cost of a purchase that's at the time of consumption can undermine the pleasure derived from it. Thinking about the benefits of a purchase can blunt the pain of making payments. Okay, so let's give you an example of that. So if, in the actual publication, this study actually gives this example, so I'm going to give it. So let's pretend you had purchased ahead of time a $50 ticket to go see U2, the famous band in the UK, right? So you go there, you show up to wherever they're having the concert at, and you go and you reach in your pocket for your ticket and you realize, oh my gosh, I lost my ticket, can't find it anywhere. So mental accounting goes like this. So you can have two ways of thinking. You could think, well, I just lost a ticket, I'll just buy another one. Not a big deal, whatever. You go purchase it, go on, enjoy the show. Now, the other aspect of mental accounting is actually breaking down how much everything really is costing you. So we're thinking about, well, I drove here already. I already purchased the $50. That $50 was coming out of my account and beginning to make this mental tally of all the other bills you have in your mind, of everything else that you have to pay this week, of all the other potential bills that are coming and going and the ins and outs. So in the end, when you do the second part, you no longer have that desire, that pleasure to even want to go watch this concert, nor do you even want to buy that ticket. But if you don't think about any of those things, if you don't do this mental accounting, if you just go, oh, let's buy another ticket, I lost it, okay, got another one, then they're in the brain. We still have the capability to enjoy and feel pleasure in that moment. But when we start breaking everything down, you really don't feel like buying that ticket. So that's mental accounting. And believe it or not, this all plays into our realities of spending. So why is this significant? Well, for one, how often do any of us do that? Some of us do it a lot. Some of us do it sometimes we don't do it at all. So there's a danger in this. Why? Because this is how people incur a lot of debt. So we're giving these very physical aspects of money. We will be discussing the spiritual aspects of it, but it's important because if money is something, nothing other than, we should say, than a neutral thing for us to use for the good or the bad, although it's neutral, it still comes from God. And we're going to talk about how Emmanuel says that money is from God, thus it is his. Thus we are merely stewards of said money. It's not ours. Yes, hopefully the money that you are dealing with, you worked very hard for. Some of it might have come from inheritance, but most wealthy people have worked very hard for that X amount of money. So we have to learn how to be good stewards of that money. In order for us to be good stewards, meaning to have good money management, we have to understand how our brain works with it, how our brain functions around money. So it's important for us to understand that these are some of the ways our brain is affecting how we are utilizing this blessing from God. So let's go on. There's something called perspective accounting. And this basically broken down as we prefer to prepay for a vacation versus pay for it after. Pain of payment. It's buffered by the thought of future vacation to come. However, delayed payments also makes our brain feel otherwise, and discounting will be strong enough to override the benefits of prepayment. In layman's term, credit card companies benefit over time, but our brain thinks that this is better. So ideally, we're saving up money for a vacation. We're not putting it on a credit card. Because the idea is that this perspective accounting is that we are paying for it beforehand. And then we have this feeling of pain pain of payment, which is when we go to actually pay for it. It's like, oh gosh, this is, oh, I just saved this $1,000 or this $1,500 or whatever it is. And that you feel like that little twinge in your heart, like, oh, don't want to give it away, but I have to pay for this thing. So in science, they call that pain of payment. But oftentimes that pain that we feel is usually what they say is buffered out, is alleviated, because, well, I think, well, I know that this is going for something for me and my family, whether it's a trip back to your home country where you're going to be visiting family, a loved one, or what have you. So the thought of getting to see your loved ones or have that enjoyment kind of allows us for that pain to sort of pass. The problem is that when we use a credit card, our brain is not registering fully this experience. So what happens is that this delayed payment system, right, makes our brain feel otherwise. However, they say discounting will be strong enough to override the benefits of prepayments. So basically, our brains are set up to really manage money well, but because we have this system that's created that our society loves and thinks it's fantastic, and I'm not saying one way or another, but it exists, and this is what is the credit card industry, if you will, which if you do your research, it is one of the most highly marketed, publicized type of thing within money out there. There's billions of dollars put into the marketing of credit card companies. Why? Because it's a money-making system that is a detriment to most people, because of the ways in which our brain works. Because when we swipe a piece of plastic versus actually using a piece of paper, cash, it has different effects on our brain. Our brain will be able to feel the brunt of that cash that we're laying down on the table, versus when you're swiping that card, your brain's not registering that, what they call pain of payment. So what happens is we're more apt to keep swiping and swiping. Credit card companies know that. Where if you were purely just using cash, let's say you would go out and there's a picture here. Let me go back real quick. There's a graph here. I'm not sure how, I probably should make it a little bit bigger. Let me make it bigger for 1 second, because I want you all to see this clearly of how our brain works. Okay. So this was in more or less estimation. So here we go. These are just things that people were purchasing: banners, Red Sox tickets, and Celtics tickets. Okay. So the lighter blue color is people who use cash, and the dark green color are people who use credit card. So you are twice as likely to spend more money using a credit card than if you were to use cash. And why is that? It's pure neuroscience. It's because the brain doesn't really register, so it doesn't feel like you're spending a lot. So what ends up happening, you're spending a whole lot more. Versus if you'd gone to the store with an envelope full of money, you would have really felt that $150, because you took it out and then it's gone. Your brain registers it. The pain of payment is there, as they say in science, and you won't go any further. But that doesn't really happen nowadays. The credit card company is a billion-dollar industry, and we're not trying to dissuade anyone for one way or another. It's just to enlighten us, because here at the Spiritist Society of Baltimore, we are enlightening lives together, are we not? So it's just something for us to be aware of, something for us to think about. And we are to be the best that we can be, to be good stewards of the blessings that God have given to us. In the same way that we need to be mindful that God gave us this body, we need to treat it well. We need to be healthy, take care of it, because it's on loan to us, if you will. So it's like God is this giving us all this money, and we have to manage it correctly. So one other thing that's important is something called coupling. So it refers to the degree to which consumption or payment are bound together psychologically, which I kind of already touched on. So credit card companies want you to use credit card versus money because we're more apt to spend more using a credit card than cash, which is kind of what I just touched on already. So you can see here my little graph. This comes from the research paper that was published in ResearchGate about the realities of spending, that, like we just shared, you are twice as likely to spend twice as much if you go and shop with a credit card versus cash. So it's just neuroscience. It's the brain. It's the way the brain reacts. It's just the I guess you could say the neural pathways. Something for us, we really believe that it's important to understand, in as much as we are trying to understand other processes other processes in our lives. How do we stay healthy? Well, I have to know how to. I have to know that having a balanced meal, eating and drinking water, eating healthy foods, things of that nature, things that are based in science, have already been proven to work and be healthy for us. It's not just making a decision for the here and now because it feels, as children, we do things that feel good in the moment, but adults, we do things for the long run, for the betterment, the long haul. And in this book, Money, Emmanuel reminds us money is also from God. And that's what we're going to start touching on a little bit here, that being good stewards of our money. In Proverbs 3, verses 9 through 10 says, honor the Lord with your wealth, then your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will be bursting with wine. By the way, we're not saying, for anyone that might say, oh, you might be, is the Bible encouraging drinking? No, and we don't have the time to go into how wine was used at that time, a lot for religious reasons as well. So just something to keep in mind, the context of which this is actually written and the time. And also in Luke chapter 16, verse 10, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. So it really is, in very different ways, but in the same ways, telling us the same thing, to be good stewards of our money because it comes from God. So then it takes on a whole new paradigm shift. A paradigm shift needs to happen, because it's not just, oh, money is evil, money is bad. No, money comes from God. So I have to show it the utmost respect, and I have to know how to manage it to honor God. And we're going to, and Emmanuel in this book, Money, touches on that. So let's dive into that here in a second. And actually, before we dive into that, we wanted to bring one other research. And let us premise our sharing of this research by just sharing that the idea and the goal of life is not to become filthy rich. Now, if by being a good steward of your money, by being the best spiritist and Christian, or whatever area of religion that you follow, to be the best that you can possibly be, and to try your best to be the best person, to be kind, to follow, just all the good virtues and try to be virtuous. So if all that leads you to some sort of wealth by earthly standards, that's okay. That in and of itself does not make one a bad person, but our intentions, how we live our lives, that does, and which we'll touch on that. So I want to premise this before I share the research, that this research that we're going to share is is very unique. It's the only one of its kind since like the early to mid to 2000s. This is the largest study of millionaires, over 10,000 millionaires. Before this study was done, there's one, I believe, done by Harvard that was only where they studied only 4,000 millionaires. But this particular study we're going to share, that was done by Ramsey Solutions, studied over 10,000. That's how many were in the sample size. So it's like 10,000 plus. So it's a research on money that's 80% behavior and 20% head knowledge. So it's not about, you don't have to be the Mark Zuckerberg, you don't have to be Mark Cuban, you don't have to be Warren Buffett, you don't have to be these people who have all this, went to these really prestigious schools. No, you actually really don't. You just need to, it's behavior. Why is it behavior? Because it's how we're treating it. Because math is very basic. I mean, the average fourth grader, which, by the way, most publications, modern publications, meaning like newspapers, magazines, usually are about or around fourth grade reading level-ish, not talking about the really, really prestigious ones, but the basic everyday people can understand it. The idea of, well, if I buy this, but it's more than what I make, that's no good. See what I mean? But money and our management of it isn't head knowledge, isn't, because everyone knows, well, if I spend this amount, but this is the amount that I make, that could be in conflict, right? But the problem is that our behavior and the way that the marketing system works and everything like that markets to what we've already shared about the neuroscience of our brains and making us spend more money in the long run. So we have to already instill within ourselves and our children and our communities how to behave when it comes to utilizing this particular gift from God. But let's talk about the actual research that's out there. Okay, the research from this, and this data was spanned from November 2017 from January 31st of 2018. So it's just a few years ago. It's not terribly long ago. So this one particular, we could say, sort of scholar who's out there, Chris Hogan, he has a show, he has many books. And he says, how you spend and invest the money you make matters more than how much you actually bring home. And we'll talk about that in here in a second. But let's dive into the research they found. In this particular research of over 10,000 wealthy millionaires, they found that 93% of these millionaires said that they got their wealth because they worked hard, not because they had big salaries. So what does that mean? These weren't people that made 7 figures or 6 figures. I mean, they didn't make 100,000 or, 750,000, whatever it was. No, they were people that made an average amount of anywhere from like 50 to 75,000 a year, give or take. But it never was a reflection of how much they make, but it was about how hard they worked and how they managed it. They also found that 50% of millionaires were, only 50% of millionaires were in senior leadership, like vice presidents, CEOs, things of that nature. So the large percentage were just average people that had just learned how to save or invest and be good stewards of their money. Only 31% averaged 100,000 a year over the course of their career, and only one third never made 6 figures in any single working year of their career, which says a lot. And they also found that millionaires go to college, but not to elite schools. And this is a quote from the actual study itself. It says that it's the degree itself that matters, not where the degree comes from. Almost 2/3 of millionaires, 62%, graduated from public state schools, while only 8% went to prestigious private schools. But the bulk of millionaires did get that piece of paper. 8 out of 10 millionaires invested in their company's 401k. This simple step was a key to their financial success. Not only that, but 3 out of 4 of those surveys invested outside their companies, but often they didn't do single stock investments. Okay, a lot of this, there's like a little interesting facts to know. But in all of this, and one of the reasons why we wanted to bring this, again, is not for people to set a goal to become a millionaire. But again, on the flip side, not that it's bad to be a millionaire. We're just saying that we need to learn how to manage our money. And this study shows that people were able to succeed by being good stewards of their money, by handling it and respecting it. Now, this study obviously didn't go into were these people believers in God or Jesus or anything like that. They just knew how to manage it. So for us who are believers in Jesus, we do believe in God, we believe in life after death. We know that the physical life is very fleeting, that the time that we have here and that which we do with our time is so significant, makes huge ripples in our life, has a ripple effect in our life, not only for myself, but future generations, for my children as well, because what I do, they're learning. And we know, especially through the book Action and Reaction by Andrea Luiz, psychographed by the Brazilian medium Francisco Xavier, we know that our actions, there's always a consequence for them, good or bad. So it's not about this having this worldview of wanting to be a millionaire and be like a famous person. Because in actuality, like the study shows, most millionaires don't live that flashy lifestyle. The number one car type owned by millionaires is a Toyota. You would think, what, Tesla or, a Lexus didn't make it in the top 10, or the top 5, I should say. Tesla wasn't even in the top 10. Sidebar, only recently, in the recent decade or so, probably around 2007, 2008, Tesla came out making their cars, and probably in the last few years, Tesla came out with their more affordable car, which you can have to purchase straight out at $30,000 or $40,000. Anyway, that's just a side note. That's probably why that's not relevant. But anyway, the point is that it's not about flashiness. It's not about accruing. It's about real wealth and understanding what real wealth is. And we're going to talk about that. But we want to bring some basic facts that exist out there in the world, that exists out there through science, through modern knowledge, for us to know about these things. And last but not least, 3 out of 4 millionaires, 75%, said that regular, consistent investing over a long period of time is a reason for their success. So, this is a direct quote. So the story of the young computer genius who developed an app that earned millions overnight is the exception, not the rule. Why do we bring that? Because sometimes we live in this fantasy that, if I can just create the perfect app, if I can become famous, if I can go viral, I'll make millions of dollars. That's not the rule. That's an exception to the rule. And it is a very small percentage of people that are successful are that route. So we're sharing all that. So we also don't have this fantasy surrounding money, because it's one of the things that can really affect negatively in our incarnation to incarnation. And we're going to talk about an actual case from the book, Action and Reaction, chapter 9, about a very sad individual named Louise who was very much obsessed with money. And we'll go into that later, and how that was detrimental to his life and the life of his whole family. So we'll talk about that later on today. But in this particular book, The Pathway, the Truth, and the Life, Emmanuel says that money does not automatically mean an evil thing. This is important for us to know, because oftentimes money is associated with being evil. However, the Apostle Paul of the Gentiles explains to us that the love for money is the root of all kinds of evil. So it's not money in and of itself, but it is that obsession, that love for evil, of love for money, is as the root cause for all kinds of evil. A person cannot be condemned by their financial wealth, but by the incorrect use of such resources. It is through the obsession of possessing that pride and idleness, 2 ghosts of the human misfortune, attach themselves to the souls, thus compelling them to deviate from the eternal light. So it is the obsession and possessing, that pride and idleness are the 2 ghosts of human misfortune. One of the things that will drag us down into the abyss and leave us crying for many lifetimes. So it's not about money is bad, but it's how we view it, how we utilize it. In the beginning, in the introduction of this book, Money, he wanted to bring just a short excerpt from Emmanuel, who not only wrote the book, but also wrote the introduction. And he says, however, this unassuming volume, meaning the book, refers only to applying financial resources in exchange for love of one's neighbor. For all those who try to understand the subject whether by exchanging currency for bread intended to help victims of famine, or by exchanging it for medicine bottles to relieve the sick stretched out on anyone's cots, they all should recognize that money is also from God. It's a powerful statement. And throughout this book, we see this theme time and time again, underpins everything, that money comes from God. And it shouldn't be something that we obsess over having, because it'll lead to our pride, idleness, and sometimes even vanity. But it's important how we're utilizing that money. As we can see here, Emmanuel talks about exchanging currency for bread intended to help victims, or exchanging medicine bottles to relieve the sick. He goes on to say in this book, he says, money cannot buy heaven, but it can generate sympathy on earth when used for tasks of goodness. So money has no exchange value after death. Obviously, you can't bring money with you when you die, but it can and does sustain general progress. If our spirit is centered on elevated goals, money is not the absolute factor for joy and happiness, but it can be the remedy for a patient, the drop of milk for a helpless child, the shelter for the elderly relegated to the cold night, and the silent help for the homeless pilgrim. So no, money's not the end all to be all, but it can be utilized to help a lot of people that are suffering, hungry. Food insecurities, especially now with the pandemic, has risen to such an alarming degree. Equally, there also have been a lot of people, members of society, utilizing their money and their resources to feed and shelter these people. So that's how it's important. It's how we're utilizing that money and those resources that we have. He goes on to say, money is not the basis of harmony. So it's not the basis of joy or happiness, it's not the absolute factor for joy of happiness. It has no exchange after death. It cannot buy heaven. It's not the basis of harmony, but we can still use it for good things. On many occasions, Emmanuel says it can restore tranquility to discouraged paternal hearts or unhappy domestic nests. But he goes on to say to not let money steal your heart, so rules your life like a despot. We have to usefully manage money by understanding and cooperating under the influence of the law of brotherhood that brings us together. Useful management. By understanding and cooperating under the influence of the law of brotherhood that brings us together. Let's remember that Jesus blessed the widow's penny given to the temple's public coffer. Every employing money for goodness, we will convert it into a heavenly collaborator in all earthly situations and problems. In the same way, it's not money that condemns us to the process of distress. It is the way we use it when we forget to facilitate the current of progress through diligent action, fraternity, and devotion to goodness, since we must collaborate with the aggrandizement of work and life. So it's not money itself that's bad. It's how we use it, how we manage it. Not only is the rich of the parable a major debtor to life, but coined wealth is sometimes simple imprisonment. There are other greedy people we should also remember in our journey to the greater light. Not only is the rich of the parable a major debtor to light, but coined wealth is sometimes simple imprisonment. So sometimes even having wealth can imprison us. We often don't think of it that way, but it can. Aside from that, or with that, we should say, what are the ways it can imprison us? Well, for instance, Emmanuel says, the miser, hoard of wealth, miser of intelligence who lurks in the trenches of flowering inertia. So here, Emmanuel is really using this to show us a different side of wealth, that there are people who have a wealth of knowledge that don't share it. The wealthy of health who forsake the afflicted and the sick. So people who are very, very healthy and doing really well, but want nothing to do with anyone that is sick. the privilege of joy, who are closing the doors to the sad by isolating themselves in the pleasure oasis. It's a very poetic way of Emmanuel just saying, basically, there are people that have and worked hard for their happiness, but who are just completely forgetting about those who are suffering, those who are having a lot of issues, going through trials and tribulations. The happy of faith who seek solitude under the pretext of persevering against sin. Those that go and hide away in a mountaintop instead of sharing their faith with others, or living among society so people can witness their faith. The exponents of youth who despise old age. Fancy way of saying young people sometimes don't like hanging out with old people, or despised old people, or supposed old people. One should go, and in our society here in America, this is quite prevalent, but in other societies, such as in Asian countries, the elderly are highly revered. They are looked at with tremendous amount of respect, and they are the jewels of society. We can't always say that in our society that is that way, but it should be. Emmanuel goes on to say, and the favored of their terrestrial family forget the ones who wander in penury without a home. Basically, when there's a favorite in the family, you forget about everyone else who's not so much a favorite. These are the rich individuals of the common experience who contract heavy debts to humanity. That's huge, because we talked a lot about money, a little bit about debt and management. But in terms of spiritual stuff, in terms of spirituality and incurring spiritual heavy debts, it's when we have this wealth of knowledge, or this wealth of health, or happiness, or faith, or youthfulness, if we just come from a good family. It's so easy for us to forget about those who are suffering. When our life is going so well, it's so easy for us to forget about the tens of thousands of people, or even just our neighbors, people within our community, people within our family, social setting, friends, coworkers. It's like we just tune them out because it's like, well, I just care about myself. I don't want to even think about their other suffering. Emmanuel goes on to say, who will be the richest of true happiness? The one who agonizes over a lot of gold, or the one that can breathe the sense of the valley between peaceful work and the mercy of light? Do not allow charity to be an exclusive task for those who have accumulated money of this world. Instead, be merciful unto the brother or sister who is stingy and has locked his or her own heart within the thick walls of a coffer. So you don't have to be wealthy. You don't have to have a lot of money in order to be charitable. And for those who are really wealthy and are not charitable, Emmanuel is saying we should be merciful. And even other parts of this book, it says we should pray for those who have fallen down and have become blinded by money. Let us not fixate ourselves in reproach against the imprisoned brothers and sisters who are mistaken with their fleeting wealth, but let us help them without demands to understand the importance of money and time in performing good works. So it's not for us to judge. If there are people around us or in society that are using money incorrectly, it's not for us to pass judgment. Emmanuel says, when he says it's not for us, we should not fixate ourselves in reproach. So when we're watching TV, or we're out and about, or we're looking on social media and we see this supposed people who look wealthy, we shouldn't pass judgment on them. We need to be good stewards of that which we have. Whatever it is, whatever God has blessed us with, however small amount, large amount. Emmanuel also goes on to say, whoever judges by appearances almost always bumps into the quicksand of sudden transformations that will shake the building of erroneous conclusions. There are highly entitled individuals in the conventions of the world who bring with them a living source of heartfelt humility, whereas there are beggars with disfigured faces who carry inwardly the thick fog of pride that tarnishes their understanding. In layman's terms, they are people that are extremely wealthy, that have a heart of gold, and there are people that are very much not wealthy, who Emmanuel says carries a thick fog of pride, meaning they're really not humble. So it's not the money in and of itself that makes us a good or bad person. There are wonderfully rich people who are poor in avarice, and one may find poor people who regrettably are rich in stinginess. So we wanted to touch on this particular chapter. I apologize, this isn't animated here, but this particular story, and it's seamless, the story of chapter 10, and hopefully this story will kind of bring it all together for us to understand how significant management of the blessings that God gives us, whether it's money, whether it's family, the things that are just around us, things that truly are not ours. Because what do we truly possess? That's the question. Because the things that we truly do not possess are merely on loan from God. So what do I possess? The good that I do, the love that I carry, the knowledge that I acquire. Those are the things that I possess that can never be taken from me. But money, clothing, food, housing, all those things can be fleeting. They can come, they can go. I don't truly possess them. They are on loan from God. Thus, I must, according to our moral obligations, we must learn how to manage those things. So what happens when we don't? So in chapter 9 of Action Reaction, Silas' story, there are two stories that are brought up. The story of Clarindo and Lionel and their nephew, Louise. Now, Clarindo and Lionel were killed by their brother, and the reason they were killed by their brother was because their brother was greedy and wanted their inheritance. So he took them out on a boat and he got them really drunk and he pushed them overboard. They died. Everyone thought it was an accident. He inherited the money and he gave it to his family. And then when he died, it went to his son, Luis. But now Clarindo and Lionel are in the spirit world, and they're very angry. They're very angry at Luis's father, but they're also channeling all their anger towards their nephew, Luis, who is married to Adelia and who is obsessed with money. Not only is he already having this tendency already within him to be obsessed because he learned a lot of negative behaviors from his father, but his uncles, Clarindo and Lionel, out of wanting to seek revenge, they're also obsessing him. And so that the way that they are able to access him and obsess him and create all kinds of problems for him is because they're able to hone in on what they call his central desire, which was to obtain money. You can read more in depth about this in chapter 9. Highly recommend it to understand his central desire. And a lot of Lewis tells us in this book that a lot of obsessors utilize this against us. So they also refer to it, this obsession, psychic delirium, because it really, you could see what these obsessors are doing to this incarnate nephew of theirs, Louise, by going close to his mind and tuning into the mental wave, finding his central desire, using that against him. They found that his central desire is wanting to have money, money, money. If they're able to imprint images the same way a TV can broadcast scenes, they're able to sort of broadcast scenes in his mind and make him believe that that is reality, thereby making him appear crazy to the rest of the world. And Silas talks about how these diseases of the soul, it can ruin the mind for a long, long time. And indeed, they did with this particular family, this obsession for money that started with Louise's father and was continuing on with Louise. So you can see in this particular example how detrimental it was for many generations of families because of greed and not looking at money from a perspective of loving one's neighbor, honoring God through the use of it. Emmanuel also reminds us in the later chapters of this book that poverty is not the creation. Poverty is not the creation of the all-merciful. It only exists as a function of individuals' ignorance who sometimes throw themselves into the abyss of lack, complacency, or of idleness, thereby creating imbalances and shortages. Let's read that again. Poverty is not the creation of the all-merciful, meaning God. God didn't create poverty. It simply functions. It's a function that exists, Emmanuel says. It exists as a function of individuals' ignorance, sometimes throw themselves in the abyss of lack, complacency, or idleness, thereby creating imbalances and shortages. What does that mean for layman's terms? Poor money management, poor management of the assets that God blesses us with. Now, does this mean that people in these countries that really don't have running water? No, we're not talking about extremes, because if we read more in the Spirit's book, in the Gospel according to Spiritism, we know that we are born into certain areas in certain cultures for a reason, to learn and grow whatever lessons we have to learn. But if those who know more in more developed countries go in and teach these other civilizations about modern day medicine, about how to manage things, to sort of civilize, yes, there are some downfalls, as there is with anything, but there are also many great things that happen as well. You see organizations like, I think it's called like UNICEF, the Red Cross, they go in, and many different other charities that go in to provide education at very different levels, whether it's education on health, on food, how to manage things, how to build sustainability in their village. So it's kind of the idea of give a man a fish for a day versus if you teach them how to fish, you feed them for a lifetime. So that's the idea. He goes on to say to observe the elements of work that life has given to you, and do not forget that the only spring or source that sustains legitimate wealth is always work. Whether you're wealthy of the spirit or otherwise, work is a blessing. Scarcity is the process of acquiring noble qualities for those who learn to serve. Scarcity is the process of acquiring noble qualities. So when we talk about wealth and scarcity from a spiritual perspective, under the context of money, yes, we can be physically rich, but yet be spiritually poor, and vice versa. But most oftentimes, most of us are still in this scarcity where we need to work towards acquiring more virtues, learning, whether it's learning how to serve others or any that the vast array of virtues that exist out there in the world. You can name hundreds of them. Those are things to be worked towards, to be obtained. By the way, it's not just the management of money, but it's the management of everything in our lives. Finding that balance and putting God first in our lives and realizing what our goals are, writing them down, acknowledging what they are and what we're serving. Many people believe that wealth and power are signs of privilege, when gold and influence are simply nothing more than resources having only the value that we give it. You know, those cowrie shells, those little shells that we showed earlier, I mean, can you imagine, like, those were used as currency at one point because it was the value that people gave to it. And gold and things that have value only have said value because we say so. Emmanuel goes on to say, remember that all resources and situations on your way are blessings from God, inviting you to work for all in the silence of the good. Do not worry about the problem of abundance or of shortage regarding material resources, because before divine law, wealth and poverty often only mean opportunities for improvement and elevation. Only work that is felt and experienced is capable of generating wealth and adding to it infinitely. Only work that is felt and experienced is capable of generating wealth and adding to it infinitely. So we shouldn't be like Louise in the book Action and Reaction. He was constantly obsessed about obtaining more and more, constantly looking for ways. That was he lived, breathed, and ate the desire of money and acquiring wealth. And I'm saying we should not worry about those things. We should be good stewards. We should work hard, but we shouldn't become obsessed with obtaining this idealistic wealth that's going to bring us some supposed happiness. No, it's about utilizing our everyday as opportunities for growth, whether it's growing in our family, learning from each other, loving, learning how to love, forgiving, all those things. That's why people who work towards their own spiritual growth feel wealthy. And those who are physically wealthy and do not often feel scarcity. They feel poor. Emmanuel goes on to say, therefore, love the Lord has given you, or how disturbing or simple it may be, and value your time to enrich yourself today with light and love, with understanding and worthiness, so that tomorrow time does not find you with a weary heart and empty hands. Love the task the Lord has given you. In other words, wherever you may find yourself currently in life, whatever cards you've been dealt in life, that which you had no apparent choice in, learn to work on yourself anyway. There are those who were born in the most impoverished of cultures and societies, and they were able to persevere and make a difference. The Nelson Mandelas of the world. Not all people, when we know Nelson Mandela because on the large scale that he made changes, but we are sure that there are other people as well that are anonymous, that don't focus on their circumstances, but focus on setting goals, being the best person that they can be, living a balanced life. And all of that is connected to our relationship that we create with God, having that relationship, honoring God, knowing what that means, and utilizing that which He has blessed us and given to us. So we know that there were a lot of things today that we talked about, and this wasn't meant to cover every single aspect of wealth and scarcity, because there's truly so much that can be talked about on this subject. Truly, it can be something that we could do seminars upon seminars upon seminars. But really, this was meant to kind of give us a glimpse into money and spirituality. And hopefully, will make you go out and purchase this book. And you can go to the United States Spiritist Federation website and purchase it. And it's will be one of the best, ironically, investments of your money for yourself, because you'll really get a great understanding of how we need to shift this understanding, because money gets a bad rap. And we need to further our understanding of what it is and how to use it. And really, ultimately, it leads to why we're here in life, what our purpose is here in life. So, but thank you, everyone. This is our first time discussing this subject. And for sure, like I said, it could be discussed on many different ways, and probably a lot more could have been said, but we only have an hour and we went 6 minutes over. So we tried to compile a very, very dense subject into a short period of time. So forgive us if we left anything out.
Thank you, Kirsten. Yes, you have said a lot, and I think for the most part, right, the idea is for us to at least have a reference on where to find this information, and be sure that Spiritism is also guiding us to utilize this tool, right? That this vehicle, as you mentioned, you reminded us that is so important for us, because after all, we are in the physical body and we are dealing with the physical realm. So we need to learn how to manage better money as everything else that we have. So thank you for discussing this. It's not easy, especially during this moment that everybody is going through some, difficult issues, here and there. And money seems to be something that, usually it's natural to have issue or whatnot. I would like to welcome everyone, and really give thanks for all of those who has said their good evenings and welcomes and all. Also, thank everyone that will be watching us in the future, and analyzing these ideas with us as well. So thank you for tuning in. Daniel actually addressed earlier that the book can actually be bought through the website spiritistbooks.us /product/money. Thank you for if you want to visit and really purchase your copy, is certainly a great idea. It's an amazing book. And it's very light. I mean, it's nothing that is going to go take us into finances, right? Deeply.
Right.
But it really, if I can say this way, I know it's weird, it spiritualizes money.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
spiritualizes money. It's
Definitely.
a really interesting, way to look at it. And
Right.
the thing here is that we can actually apply this to other vehicles of life, our physical body,
Yeah.
right? How we see
Exactly.
food, how do we see the different sources of energy that we have around us. So it's definitely a good idea. Yasko, she starts our sessions of question by saying, the wealthy people work hard, so the ones that have little. The facility of ones that to raise wealth is in many times a question of luck as part of the plan for their trial in the current incarnation, as we are just stewards of all resources and assets, including money. Is it possible that the reason for feeling unfulfilled emotionally or feel in scarcity, even when wealth is coming from this unconscious knowledge that they don't belong ultimately to us? Excuse me. Wow, it's a long
Wow.
question.
That's a great question, and that's an amazing analysis of life. And I'm just going to look at her question again here. Yeah. So as we the facility of ones. Thank you. I was trying to read on the side there. So unfulfilled emotionally or feel in scarcity, even when wealth is coming from this unconscious knowledge that they don't belong ultimately to us. Yeah, perhaps that part of that feeling is that ultimately, yeah, those things don't belong to us, but rather perhaps maybe it's an echo of the laws of God that's written in our conscience, that we need to be mindful of how we're utilizing said benefits, and being mindful of how we live, being mindful of how we manage very few, and there's research based, very few millionaires or wealthy people are so from wealth. A small percentage are from luck or inheritance. The majority are from people that have worked hard to obtain that. And that's just in recent studies in the recent last few years. Whether it was that way 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, couldn't tell you. But in recent years, no, it's from people working hard. And quite possibly, yes. I mean, it could be an echo from that part of us that we know that it's not truly ours, but also I think it's a nod to the fact that, you know, that that true feeling of feeling full and happy is not from external things, which is tends to where we go towards. Yasko, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but this is how I understood your question, I guess. It's not, because that's often what we go towards, right? We try to fill ourselves up with external things, but really our soul, our spirit, beckons us to be filled with all things that are truly permanent, which is ironic because we often fill ourselves with things that are truly impermanent, money, physical things, physical wealth, instead of filling our lives with love and connection, spirituality, and God, and loving your neighbor and pursuing virtues. So, it's what makes us, in the gospel, they say, it's one of the things that makes us different from the animals is this incessant desire to be better. It's like this echo within our soul. So I'm not sure if I'm looking at her question again, if I answered it exactly as she wanted. Leo, if you wanted to jump in, if you felt like her question meant something else, you let me know.
No, I think you're covering it. You covered. I think the idea is to really be able to think what we have and use the best of it, and not dive into the idea that, well, I don't have because of this or that, or if I have it, I should use this or that way. So yeah, I mean, I think that we're on the right path here. So thank you for clarifying that.
Sure.
There are two questions here. One Daniel actually posed, and I'll read it, not only his question, but one that I posed as well. I'm sorry for like the several times that I posed my questions, but I'll read together because I think they are on the same line. I'll do a little bit different. So the first one from Daniel is, since wealth and scarcity are feelings, how one can cope with these feelings in order to make a spiritual progress. And then, since scarcity and wealth is not what we have but a feeling, what are we supposed to do in case we feel that scarcity has knocked on our door? Or even, and this is the part that I think would like to give it a highlight here, what are we supposed to do when we do not believe that we are worth of wealth? Because we often see this idea of, yes, I mean, we complain a lot about scarcity, but there are a lot of people who have a great potential, and to be wealthy in different ways, but they do not believe that they are worth of it.
Wow, those are great, great questions. And I would say it's hard to generalize. So I'll try to answer all the questions. So if wealth and scarcity are feelings, how can we cope with these feelings in order to make spiritual progress? So wealth and scarcity are feelings, right? So we acknowledge that it's not physical things that makes us feel like truly happy. Because when we are working towards being more virtuous, being more of a good person, writing out our goals and trying to obtain them, and just being more spiritual, we are more likely to feel wealthy, right? But the opposite happens when I'm seeking only physical things, I'm seeking only material things, I'm more apt to feel scarcity. Why? Because the very way that God created us, we are intended to be fulfilled not by external things, but by things that truly we own forever, which is our good deeds, the good aspects of ourselves, the virtues like we keep referring to. So it's I guess it's not about coping with these feelings. It's learning how to utilize that knowledge of those feelings and work towards being truly fulfilled. We ultimately will feel good when we begin to be good stewards of not only our money, but our lives. There are hundreds of thousands of people that once they get on this new road of being good stewards of their money, there's this immediate sense of, wow, it feels like I'm doing the right thing, the sense of accomplishment, a sense of, just liberating in a sense, because we know that that's the right path that we need to be on. So in terms of the other question, since scarcity and wealth is not what we have, but a feeling, what are we supposed to do in case we feel the scarcity has knocked on our door? So if scarcity has knocked on our door from the definition of scarcity, not being materially poor, but being spiritually poor, it depends upon how we're having the perspective. So if a person is feeling like, wow, I don't have a lot of money, I don't have a lot of things, then that's a mentality, a scarcity mentality. They actually talk about it in the book. It's not a Spiritist book. Seven highly or seven. Oh gosh, it's a Stephen Covey book, and I always mess it up. If someone's out there in the listening to this, I always screw up the name of this book. Seven healthy, highly effective habits. The 7 highly effective habits of I completely, I'm drawing a blank. But anyway, it's a book by Stephen Covey, and I actually have it on my desk over there. I would grab it, but I don't want to come out of the focus here. I'll post in the comments later the actual name of the title because it's completely just messing up my mind.
The
But the point
7
of,
habits of highly effective people.
yes, thank you. I always screw that up. So in that book, they talk about the scarcity mentality, that we look at, oh wow, I don't have a brand new car. Oh wow. Or not, oh wow, like, oh gosh, I don't have a fancy this, I don't have a fancy that. So we're always looking at what we don't have versus having that wealth mentality of like, wow, I'm so grateful that I have food. I'm so grateful that I have a bed. And it's difficult unless we are really working towards ourselves and understanding this. So I'll give you an example, a personal example, and forgive me because it's just what's coming to my mind at this present time is that but many decades ago when I was young and we were engaged in uh, volunteer work and within our community, and there was one particular day that we were helping a member of our community who was a homeless man. And he had a very peculiar situation. He actually was living in this wooded area on a mattress that was infested with bed bugs. And it's one thing to be able to donate money to a cause, but when you actually go to a place and see someone living in such squalor, that live in such horrible states, it really, when I went home that day, growing up, there was a period of time where the mattress that I slept on, it was a spring mattress. So we didn't have a whole lot of money. And I think my mom's watching it. So mom, don't feel bad for this or anything. But I remember our spring mattress, you could feel the springs because it just didn't have the money to buy like a really brand new mattress. But I remember going home that day and thinking, oh my goodness, I'm so grateful for the springs in this mattress. I'm so grateful I have a home. I'm so grateful that at night I'm not cold. I don't have to worry about food. We didn't live in a super fancy place. We didn't have a lot of fancy things, but that experience changed my life. That is what we experience, what true wealth is. And whereas for a long time as a young person, I experience that scarcity mentality, looking also at the external things like, oh, we don't have the nicest things. And I could look at my neighbor and see he or she had lots of things. But once you really experience in life what really matters, what's truly important, your feeling about it changes. So I want to answer the last part of the question. What are we supposed to do when we do not? Oh, it got cut off. Okay. What do we do when we do not believe that we are worth the wealth? Well, that really touches on an aspect of, it's something it's hard to be general about, because many people can have that feeling that they don't, that lack of self-worth. They don't believe that whether they carry guilt from a previous life or not, or this life, whether they don't have a lot of self-love. So that could possibly be something that, that individual needs to do a deeper dive into themselves and find out what part of them feels that way and why they feel that way. And maybe it's going to take that deep dive into themselves to reconnect with their higher power, with God, with Jesus, to recognize their importance, to recognize that we're all destined for happiness and we're worthy, to recognize their worthiness. And oftentimes, this is an unconscious belief that we hold within the shadows, our unconscious mind, unconscious parts of ourselves, the unworthiness. We just don't feel like we have that worth, so I'm never going to get it, or what have you.
Very
I hope
real.
that answers.
Yes, no, thank you. Thank you. A couple comments here from Paula that I would like to
Paula.
share as well. When she says that she already has the book, so she's
Good.
already reading. I love Paula because when we have a conversation about a book, she pulls it out and she's reading.
Yeah.
She's accompanying the whole thing. Anyways, all right, on page 72 of Money, Emmanuel reminds us to add the light of love to our financial charity to help you reconcile with yourself. Please comment.
Yes, I'm actually going to read it's a short little paragraph, and Emmanuel says, "You may distribute handfuls of gold that are poured from your bag. However, in so doing, if you forget to add the light of your love in the form of respect and affection before others' wounds, then you will have neglected to include the understanding that will help you reconcile with yourself." I'm going to read that again because that's a mouthful. You may distribute handfuls of gold, meaning you could give away tons of money, pour it out of your wallet. However, in so doing, if you forget to add the light of your love in the form of respect and affection for others' wounds, then you will have neglected to include the understanding that will help you reconcile with yourself. Okay. What does this mean to us? So this means there's a example of this. I believe I want to say, it could be in the Gospel, one of the Spiritist books. I can't remember offhand, but this is a story, and this story illustrates what Emmanuel's trying to say. There's a woman, and she goes out to do charity work. She's a very wealthy woman, very wealthy, has all the fixings of everything that you can imagine that someone who might be wealthy, that just has really nice things and things of that nature. However, when she goes to do her charity work, she doesn't go driving in any fancy car. She doesn't go wearing anything fancy. She sort of just wears regular clothes, just looks like a regular everyday person. Why does she do this? So as not to offend those that are going through suffering. And let me share more of the story. So this particular woman, she goes out and she performs all this charity. People don't really know who she is because she goes to a different town, or people don't know her because in her small town, people do and are familiar with her. So she goes sort of farther away where people don't know that she's wealthy because she doesn't want people to know. and she doesn't want to make it seem like she's being boisterous. But on one particular day, someone knocks on her door. When she opens the door, it's a young mother who is from a neighboring town who she had helped before. And this mother, you could see she was poor, and she was coming to the door to sell some goods to earn a legitimate income. So when the wealthy woman opened her door and she sees this poor woman, the poor woman recognizes her as one of the benefactors and immediately begins to say, "Oh my gosh, this is you. You're wealthy. You live in this." And she says, "Say nothing to anyone. Don't tell anyone." So in that story, we learn that when we're going out to do our charity work, we shouldn't do so with so much ostentation where we're making others feel bad. And it's something we have to be very much aware and cognizant of. That when we are doing charity work in whatever form that is, we're doing so in a loving, humble manner. That we're not doing so where it's going to hurt the person that's receiving that gift. It is a bit of a art form in a sense, because you may not know exactly, like, well, it may be an area we're not sure. That's why it's always good to do to work in a community of having friends that you're working together, and to also reevaluate in yourself why you're doing what you're doing. Because sometimes it's that unconscious pride and vanity, wanting to just, expose ourselves as rich and wealthy and put our names everywhere. And it's not about that, because we have to be cognizant of the person receiving that from us. Because a lot of people don't want to accept help because they're ashamed or they're embarrassed. So me coming in and doing certain things could really make that difficult on the person receiving. So I hope I answered your question.
Very well, great, Kirsten. Thank you for sharing that. And one of our, this is going to be the last comment, because I think it's important for us to bring this aspect as well of our lives. The way we feel, sometimes it's just a, let's say, a result of what we learn from others, what we gather from others, the environment in which we live in, right? Paula brought this up to us, and she said, "I have always danced with two attitudes about money, rooted in my mother's anxiety and my father's generosity. And they were both wonderful souls." I think I mean, if you can comment on it. And as you finish your comment, I would also ask you to lead us into our final prayer to close this amazing evening, this amazing topic that you discussed. And so we can finalize everything.
So so thank you everyone for participating and listening. And just, I guess, my final comments and kind of a comment to what Paula had said is that everything in life is about balance. It's not about being overly generous or stingy. It's finding that middle ground, that balance between learning how to be generous, but also learning how to be good stewards of the things that God has given to us, whether it's money or assets or things. um, and we're not talking about being a millionaire. We're talking just being an everyday regular Joe, regular person, and just having balance. And within Spiritism, we learned that that's really important as well, to have equilibrium in all things, and in all things to find gratitude and to honor God. So thank you all so much for listening and participating today, and hope that this inspires you to do more reading and more studying on this particular subject, to enrich your life and to truly find purpose in your everyday lives. So thank you all so much. Leo, did you want to do the empire, or did you want me to?
You can go ahead and lead us with
Okay.
prayer. Thank you.
Okay. So close your eyes. And in this moment where we connect with our higher power, with our mentor and spirit guides, with our Master Jesus, in deep and profound gratitude, We are thankful for these moments to be together in this virtual community, to talk about elevated ideals and ideas, and to spread love, kindness, and all the good virtues that Jesus and Spiritism has taught us, in hopes that we can vibrate through these virtual airways to all those who are in need and those who are seeking deeper purpose and meaning. We pray especially for those that are going through tremendous suffering, those that have succumbed or suffered from this pandemic, whether it's by discarnating from the disease itself or feeling the negative effects in the economy and in their home and elsewhere. We pray, dear Lord, for our society, but all those who seek solace and comfort. We pray for our country. We pray for its world leaders, that their heart may be touched by love, by all the teachings that Jesus has taught us. And we thank you for this moment and this blessing of being here right now in this life. We thank you, and so be it.
Thank you.